Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story comes from a guy named Michael, 42 years old, former Army veteran from San Antonio, Texas. After 20 years of service, 3 deployments, 2 failed marriages, and a body that ached in ways the VA could never quite fix, Michael did something most guys only dream about. He took his military pension, cashed out his savings, and bought a one-way ticket to Da Nang, Vietnam. The math was simple. His pension, $2,800 a month, would let him live like a king in Southeast Asia. The condo he found online was $600 a month, furnished, with a balcony overlooking the Han River. Back in Texas, that same money got you a sad studio and a sketchy part of town. In Vietnam, paradise. Or so he thought. Because what started as the best decision of his life slowly became something else entirely. A cautionary tale about freedom, loneliness, and the price of feeling wanted. If you've ever felt trapped by the cost of living back home, or if you've dreamed of starting fresh somewhere beautiful and affordable, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever wondered what it's really like to chase the expat dream. This one's gonna hit different. Trust me. I'm not the kind of guy who makes impulsive decisions. 20 years in the Army beats that out of you pretty quick. You learn to assess, plan, execute. You learn to calculate risk. But sitting in my apartment in San Antonio in March of last year, staring at a stack of bills I could barely afford, and a lease renewal that was jacking my rent up another $200 a month, I felt something snap. I'd done everything right, served my country, followed the rules, came home. Got out with an honorable discharge and a pension that was supposed to take care of me, $2,800 a month. Sounds decent until you realize that in America, in 2024, that's barely enough to survive. My rent was $1,500, utilities, another $200, car insurance, phone bill, groceries, gas. I was scraping by, and for what? So I could keep living in a place that didn't give a damn about me. I'd scroll through Facebook and see guys I served with posting pictures from Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, living in nice apartments, eating good food, smiling for the first time in years. And I'd think, why the hell am I still here? So I started researching. I'm talking spreadsheets, cost of living calculators, expat forums, YouTube videos. And Vietnam kept coming up. Specifically, Da Nang not as crazy as Saigon, not as touristy as Hanoi, but modern enough that you had everything you needed. Guys were renting nice one-bedroom condos for $500 to $700 a month. Some even cheaper if you were willing to live a bit outside the expat areas. Food was stupid cheap. A full meal at a local spot, $1.50. Western food if you needed it, $5 to $8. Beer, 50 cents. A gym membership, $20 a month. I did the math over and over, trying to find the catch, but there wasn't one. With my pension, I could live well, save money, and actually enjoy my life. The decision kind of made itself. I gave my landlord notice, sold most of my stuff, kept what fit in 2 duffel bags, and booked a one-way ticket. My ex-wife called it a midlife crisis. My buddies from my unit called it genius. I didn't care what anyone called it. I just knew I had to go. The flight was long. San Antonio to Houston to Tokyo to Da Nang. 36 hours of airports and recycled air, and that weird limbo feeling where you're not anywhere, just suspended between lives. When I finally landed, it was late afternoon, and the heat hit me the second I stepped off the plane. Not Texas heat, which is dry and mean. This was thick, humid, the kind that wraps around you and makes your shirt stick to your back in 30 seconds. But it felt good. It felt alive. I grabbed my bags, went through customs, and walked out into the arrival hall where a wall of taxi drivers started waving signs and yelling prices. I'd already arranged a ride through the rental agent who found my condo, so I just kept walking until I saw a guy holding a sign with my name on it. He smiled, grabbed one of my bags, and led me to a car that was cleaner than any cab I'd ever taken in the States. The drive into the city was surreal. Motorbikes everywhere, weaving through traffic like schools of fish. Women in conical hats selling fruit on the side of the road. Buildings that looked brand new, right next to buildings that looked 100 years old. And then we hit the coast road, and I saw the ocean, this perfect stretch of blue-green water with white sand beaches, and the Han River cutting through the city with bridges lit up in neon. The driver pointed at one, said something in Vietnamese I didn't understand, then said in broken English, Dragon Bridge, fire show, Saturday, Sunday. I nodded like I knew what he meant. Later I'd learned the bridge is shaped like a dragon. And on weekends, it actually breathes fire and sprays water. Touristy as hell, but the first time I saw it, I felt like a kid. Like I'd moved to a place where things could still surprise me. My condo was in the Hai Chau district, not right on the beach, but close enough, about a 10-minute scooter ride. The building was narrow, squeezed between a coffee shop and a tailor, with a little reception desk on the ground floor and a tiny elevator that fit maybe 2 people. My unit was on the 4th floor. The agent met me there, a Vietnamese woman in her 30s, named Han, who spoke perfect English and handed me 2 keys and a rental agreement. $600 a month, she said. 15,770,000 dong. Utilities separate, but usually another 40 to 60 bucks depending on how much I ran the air conditioning, Wi-Fi included. She showed me around. 1 bedroom with a double bed and a closet. A bathroom with a decent shower and a toilet that had a bidet attachment, which I didn't know how to use but figured I'd learn. A small kitchen with a 2-burner stove, a mini fridge, and a rice cooker. And a living room that opened onto a balcony with 2 plastic chairs and a view of the river. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't big. But it was mine, and it was 600 bucks, and I could hear the city humming outside, and I thought, yeah, this is it. This is the move. I spent the first week just figuring out how to exist, how to cross the street without getting hit by a motorbike, how to order food when the menu was in Vietnamese and the guy behind the counter didn't speak English, how to buy groceries, pay bills, use the washing machine. Little things that would have been easy back home, but here required effort. But it was good effort, you know? It felt like I was building something. I found a street vendor near my building who made strong Vietnamese coffee with condensed milk for 15,000 dong, about 60 cents. I'd get one every morning, sit on my balcony, and watch the city wake up. Motorbikes flooding the streets. People doing Tai Chi in the park across the river. The sun coming up over the water, turning everything gold. I'd sip my coffee and think, I'm actually doing this. I'm actually living here. The money side of things worked out even better than I expected. My pension hit my U.S. bank account on the 1st of every month, $2,800. I'd transfer what I needed to my Vietnamese bank account, and the exchange rate was solid, around 26,000 dong to the dollar. Rent was 600, which left me 2,200 for everything else. I started tracking my spending, not because I had to, but because I was curious. Breakfast, a banh mi from the cart down the street, 25,000 dong, $1. Lunch at a local calm spot. Rice with grilled pork and vegetables, 40,000 dong, $1.50. Dinner at a nicer place with a view, 150 to 200,000 dong, 6 to 8 bucks. I'd go to the gym, a no-frills spot with free weights and older machines, $20 a month. I rented a scooter, a beat-up Honda that got me anywhere I needed to go, 60 bucks a month. I'd get a massage once a week, full body, deep tissue, in a clean place where they didn't try to upsell you on happy endings, $10. My total monthly expenses, including rent, were hovering around $1,400. I was saving over 1,000 bucks a month and living better than I ever had in Texas. I started exploring the city, finding my spots. Thuong Beach became my default hangout, this strip of sand with a row of bars and restaurants facing the water. It's where the expats congregated, mostly Western guys in their 40s, 50s, 60s, sitting under umbrellas drinking cheap Bia Saigon and watching the waves. I'm not usually a joiner, but after a couple weeks of eating alone and sleeping alone and wandering around alone, I craved conversation with people who understood where I was coming from. I started recognizing faces. There was Dave, a guy from Melbourne who'd been in Da Nang for 3 years, running some kind of online business. There was Klaus, a German dude who'd retired early from a factory job and decided Southeast Asia was cheaper than Bavaria. There was Tommy, another American vet, Air Force, who'd done the same math I had and ended up here. We didn't talk about deep stuff. Mostly we complained about politics back home, how expensive everything had gotten, how impossible it was to date in the West, how broken the system felt. And then we'd clink bottles and say, but we got out. And it felt true. We'd found the escape hatch. The locals were friendly in a way that surprised me. I'd been warned that Vietnamese people could be standoffish, that there was still resentment about the war, but I never felt it. Shopkeepers smiled when I walked in. Waiters were patient when I butchered the pronunciation of a dish. My neighbors, an older couple who didn't speak English, would nod and say, Xin Kao, every time we passed in the hallway. It wasn't fake friendliness, the kind you get from people who want something. It just felt normal, like I was part of the place, even though I clearly wasn't. I'd ride my scooter through the streets at night, the air finally cooling down, the sidewalks packed with families eating dinner at plastic tables, kids running around, grandmothers fanning themselves, and I'd feel this weird sense of peace I hadn't felt since before my first deployment, maybe earlier, maybe ever. Around week 6, I started thinking this might not be temporary. I'd come with the idea of trying it for 6 months, seeing how it went, keeping my options open. But I was already thinking in terms of years. I could stay here, build a life, maybe teach English on the side if I got bored, though I didn't need the money. Maybe learn Vietnamese properly, not just the survival phrases. Maybe this was it. The place I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking. I posted pictures on Facebook.sunset from my balcony, a plate of fresh shrimp and morning glory at a beachside restaurant, a selfie on my scooter with the Marble Mountains in the background. The comments rolled in. Living the dream, brother. Jealous AF. How's the cost of living, really? Save a spot for me if I make it out there. And I felt proud, like I'd figured something out that most people never would. Like I'd won. That's the headspace I was in the night I met Lynn. It was a Thursday, late afternoon, and I'd gone to Nthwang Beach by myself. The expat crew wasn't around, probably because it was a weekday and the weather was overcast, threatening rain. I grabbed a table at one of the quieter bars, ordered a beer, and just sat there watching the ocean. There were a few locals on the beach, a couple of tourists, but it was mostly empty, peaceful. And that's when I saw her. She was sitting 2 tables over, alone, sipping a coconut through a straw. She wasn't dressed like the bar girls who worked the tourist bars, the ones in tight dresses and heels who'd sidle up and ask if you wanted company. She was wearing a simple sundress, white with little flowers, and sandals. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She had this quiet, thoughtful expression, like she was lost in her own head, and she kept looking out at the water like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming. I almost didn't approach her. The guys had warned me. Don't trust the local girls, David said. They're sweet until they're not. Then suddenly, her whole family needs money and you're funding someone's new house in the countryside. Tommy had nodded. If she's sitting alone at a beach bar, she's working. Doesn't matter how innocent she looks. But something about her felt different. Maybe it was the way she wasn't trying to make eye contact with anyone, wasn't scanning the bar for targets. She just seemed like a regular person having a quiet drink, and I thought, screw it, what's the worst that happens? She says no. I walked over, beer in hand, and asked in my broken Vietnamese, Xin Loe, Tuan Nong Gui, De Dua Kong. Can I sit here? She looked up, surprised, then smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small, polite one. Yes, of course, she said in English. Her accent was light, easier to understand than most locals I'd talked to. I sat down, introduced myself. She said her name was Lynn. We started talking, small talk at first. How long had I been in Da Nang? A couple months. How did I like it? I loved it. Where was I from? Texas. She nodded like she knew where that was, though I wasn't sure she did. I asked if she was from here. She said yes, born and raised, though the city had changed a lot in the last 10 years. More tourists, more development, more noise. I asked if that was a bad thing. She shrugged. Some good, some bad. Depends on the day. We talked for maybe an hour. She didn't ask about my job, my money, my relationship status, any of the things I'd been conditioned to expect. She asked what I thought of Vietnamese food, if I'd tried bun cha yet. If I'd been to Hoi An, we talked about the beach, about how different the ocean felt here compared to the Gulf Coast back home. She told me she worked at a hotel in the city, front desk, and that her English had gotten better from talking to guests. She asked if I missed home. I said sometimes, but not as much as I thought I would. She said that made sense. When you find a place that feels right, you don't need the old place anymore. And something about the way she said it, so matter of fact, like she understood something fundamental about leaving and staying, made me feel seen in a way I hadn't in years. When the rain finally started, light at first, then heavier, she stood up to leave. I asked if she wanted to get dinner sometime. She paused, like she was considering whether I was serious or just another tourist looking for a quick thing, then said, okay. We exchanged numbers. She left, and I sat there in the rain for a few minutes, beer getting watered down, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not lust, not loneliness, though those were part of it. It was hope. The kind that makes you think maybe this paradise thing isn't just about cheap rent and good weather. Maybe it's about connection. about finding someone who makes the place feel less foreign. And as I rode my scooter back to my condo that night, the rain soaking through my shirt, the streets slick and glowing under the streetlights, I thought, yeah, this was the right move. This was exactly where I was supposed to be. That first dinner with Lynn set the tone for everything that came after. We met at a small restaurant she recommended, not in the touristy part of town, but in a neighborhood I'd never been to. Narrow streets with laundry hanging between buildings and motorbikes parked on the sidewalks. The place didn't have a sign in English, just Vietnamese characters I couldn't read. And inside it was packed with locals eating at low plastic tables. She was already there when I arrived, waved me over, and I felt that same thing I'd felt on the beach. Like she was real. Like this wasn't a performance. We ordered without looking at a menu because there wasn't one. She just talked to the owner in rapid Vietnamese and food started appearing. Fresh spring rolls with peanut sauce. Grilled pork vermicelli. Some kind of fish cooked in clay pot with caramel sauce that was the best thing I'd tasted since arriving. The whole meal cost maybe $6 for both of us. We talked for 3 hours. About nothing important and everything important at the same time. She asked about the army, not in a prying way, just curious. What was it like? Did I miss it? I told her some of it, the parts I could talk about. The brotherhood, the structure, the feeling of purpose that disappeared the moment you got out. She listened without trying to fix anything or offer platitudes. Just listened. And when she talked about her life, working at the hotel, dealing with demanding guests, sending money back to her family in the countryside, it felt honest. Like she wasn't trying to impress me or manipulate me. She was just being herself. We started seeing each other regularly after that. A couple times a week at first, then almost every day. She'd take me to places I never would have found on my own. A pho shop where the broth had been simmering since 4 in the morning and cost 40,000 dong. A coffee place tucked in an alley where they roasted the beans right there and served it thick and strong with a side of green tea to cut the bitterness. The Marble Mountains on a weekday morning when the tourist buses hadn't arrived yet, and we could climb the steps to the temple caves in silence. She taught me Vietnamese phrases beyond the basics. Not just hello and thank you, but useful things. How to bargain at the market. How to order food without pointing like an idiot. How to tell someone their dog was cute, which apparently people appreciated. She'd laugh when I got the tones wrong. 6 tones in Vietnamese, and I couldn't hear the difference between half of them. But she never made me feel stupid. She'd just repeat it slower, put my hand on her throat so I could feel the vibration, and we'd practice until I got it close enough. I started bringing her to my condo. She'd cook dinner, these elaborate Vietnamese meals that took hours and filled the whole apartment with smells I was starting to recognize. Lemongrass, fish sauce, lime, cilantro. She'd move around my tiny kitchen like she owned it, chopping vegetables with speed and precision, tasting the broth and adjusting the seasoning. And I'd sit at my little table and watch her and think, this is what I was missing. Not just a woman, but this. Someone who wanted to take care of me, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. After dinner, we'd sit on the balcony, her in one plastic chair and me in the other, sometimes talking, sometimes just quiet, watching the lights on the river and the motorbikes streaming past below. She never asked to stay the night in those first few weeks. She'd kiss me goodnight at the door, soft and slow, and then she'd leave on her motorbike, and I'd stand there like a teenager feeling something I didn't have words for. The expat guys noticed the change in me. I wasn't showing up at An Thuong Beach as much, and when I did, I wasn't staying long. Dave asked if I was seeing someone. I told him about Lynn, and his face did this thing, not quite a frown, but close. Be careful, mate, he said. I know she seems different, but they all seem different at first. Tommy nodded. How long have you known her? 2 months? 3? Just keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't start giving her money. I laughed it off. Told them they were cynical. Told them Lynn wasn't like that. But their words stuck with me, made me hyper-aware, looking for signs that she was playing me. And I didn't see any. She didn't ask where I worked or how much money I made, didn't hint about expensive things she wanted, didn't talk about her problems unless I specifically asked. If anything, she seemed almost too independent, like she didn't need me at all, and that made me want her more. It was around the 3-month mark when things started to shift. Small things at first, so small I didn't even register them as red flags. We were having coffee one morning at my place, and she seemed distracted, quieter than usual. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated, said it was nothing, but I pushed. Finally, she told me her father wasn't doing well. He lived in a village about 2 hours outside Da Nang, had some kind of heart condition, needed medication, but the local clinic didn't have it. She'd have to go to a pharmacy in the city, and the medicine was expensive. She said it like she was just venting, not asking for anything, but I could see the worry in her face. How expensive? I asked. She looked embarrassed. 2 million dong, maybe 2.5. I did the math in my head. 80, 90 bucks, nothing. I told her I'd give her the money. She shook her head, said no, she couldn't accept that, but I insisted. Told her I wanted to help, told her it wasn't a big deal. She teared up a little, hugged me, said thank you in Vietnamese and English, and I felt like a hero. Like I'd done something meaningful. I handed her $100 in dong, and she left that afternoon to visit her family, and I didn't think twice about it. She came back 2 days later with a small bag of street food as a thank you gift. Told me her father was doing better, that the medication was working, that her family was grateful. She seemed lighter, happier, and I thought, see, this is what a real relationship looks like. You help each other. You take care of each other. The guys at the beach were just bitter. A couple weeks later, her motorbike broke down. She called me from the side of the road, frustrated, said the engine was making a weird noise and now it wouldn't start. I told her to get it towed to a repair shop and I'd meet her there. The mechanic looked it over, said something in Vietnamese to Lynn, and she translated. The engine needed work, some part one didn't understand, and it would cost 3 million dong, 115 bucks. She looked stressed, said she'd have to save up for a few months, maybe take the bus in the meantime. I told her not to worry about it. I'd cover it. She argued, said I'd already helped with her father, that she couldn't keep taking money from me. But I waved her off, told her it was fine. Told her I had the money, and what was the point of having it if I couldn't use it to help someone I cared about. She kissed me right there in the repair shop, in front of the mechanic, and I felt 10 feet tall. The money thing became a pattern. Not constant, not every week, but regular enough that I started to notice. There was always something. Her hotel cut her hours, said tourism was slower than expected, and she was worried about making rent on her little room near the city center. I suggested she just stay with me. Why pay rent when you're here almost every night anyway? She hesitated, said she didn't want to impose, didn't want me to feel like she was using me. I told her that was ridiculous. I wanted her there. She made the place feel like home. After a few days of back and forth, she agreed, and just like that, she moved in. It wasn't a big move, just 2 bags of clothes and some toiletries, and she immediately started making the place better. Bought a nice rice cooker to replace my shitty one, hung curtains in the bedroom, put plants on the balcony, organized my kitchen so it actually made sense. She stopped going to the hotel, said her manager had let her go, something about downsizing, and she was looking for another job, but the market was tough. I told her to take her time. My pension covered both of us easily. She could relax, figure out what she really wanted to do. But with her there all the time, I started noticing things I'd missed before. She was on her phone constantly, not in an annoying way, not scrolling social media or playing games, but texting. Long conversations in Vietnamese with people she'd refer to vaguely as friends or family. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd say her cousin, or her friend from school, or her mom, and then change the subject. She'd go out in the evening sometimes, say she needed to see a friend, wouldn't give details about where or who. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous, controlling guy, so I didn't push. But it gnawed at me. The first night she went out and came back at 11, smelling like cigarette smoke even though she said she didn't smoke, I asked where she'd been. She said her friend's house. They'd been watching movies. I asked which friend. She got defensive, said I was being paranoid, asked if I didn't trust her. I backed off, apologized, told her I was just curious. But that old military instinct, the one that kept me alive in places where trust got people killed, started whispering in the back of my head. Something wasn't right. The request for money continued. Her younger brother, she said, needed school fees. $200. I paid it. Her mother's medication was running out, and the family couldn't afford to refill it. $150. I sent it. The water buffalo her family used to plow their rice fields died, and they needed to buy a new one, or they'd lose their crop. $400. I hesitated on that one. A water buffalo? It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. But she showed me pictures of her family's farm, the fields, the dead buffalo lying in the mud, and I felt like an asshole for doubting her. I transferred the money. Every time I gave her money, she'd thank me profusely, sometimes cry, tell me I was saving her family, that she didn't know what she'd do without me. And every time I'd feel that same hit of validation. I was the provider, the protector, the man who could fix things. It felt good in a way that nothing else in my life had felt good in years. But I was also keeping track, not obsessively, not writing it down, but in my head I knew. Between the initial medical bills, the motorbike, the rent money she never paid because she moved in with me, the school fees, the medication, the water buffalo, I'd given her over $2,000 in 4 months. And that didn't count the fact that I was covering all our living expenses. Rent, food, utilities, everything. My monthly spending had gone from $1,400 to about $1,900, which was still fine, still well within my pension, but the trajectory was starting to concern me. I told myself it was temporary. Once she found a job, things would balance out. Once her family got through this rough patch, the requests would stop. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Because the alternative, that I was being played, that the guys at the beach were right, that Lynn was just another girl working a long con on a lonely expat, was too painful to accept. There were good moments, too. I don't want to make it sound like it was all bad. We'd have mornings where she'd wake up before me and make Vietnamese coffee and bring it to me in bed, and we'd sit there watching the sunrise over the river and everything would feel perfect. We'd take day trips on the scooter, her arms wrapped around my waist, riding up to Hai Van Pass or down to Hoi An, and I'd feel free in a way I'd forgotten was possible. She'd cook these elaborate dinners and invite a couple of her friends over, and even though I couldn't understand most of the conversation, I'd sit there drinking beer and smiling and feeling like I was part of something. Like I had a life here. A real life. Not just an escape, but an actual home. Those moments kept me hooked. Kept me ignoring the warning signs that were piling up like sandbags before a flood. But late at night, when she was asleep next to me, and I was staring at the ceiling listening to the sound of motorbikes and street vendors and the city that never really went quiet, I'd run through the numbers in my head. $2,000 in 4 months, 6 months in Da Nang total. My savings account back in the States, which I'd planned to leave untouched, was down about $3,000 from where it started because I'd had to transfer extra money a couple times to cover the unexpected expenses. I was still technically saving money compared to living in Texas, but not as much as I'd projected, and the requests weren't slowing down. If anything, they were getting bigger, more frequent, more urgent. Her family's problems seemed endless. Her job search seemed to be going nowhere. She'd mentioned applying to hotels, to restaurants, to tour companies, but nothing ever came through. And I'd wonder, was she even really looking? Or had she already found her job, and it was managing me? I started paying more attention to her phone habits. Not snooping, I didn't cross that line yet, but noticing. She'd get a message, and her face would change. Just for a second, a little smile or a frown, and then she'd type back quickly and put the phone face down. She had a lock screen, a 4-digit code I didn't know. She'd take calls in the other room, speaking in low Vietnamese I couldn't understand. Once I heard her laugh, a specific kind of laugh that sounded flirty, and when she came back I asked who it was. She said her cousin. I asked which cousin. She said I wouldn't know him, and changed the subject by asking what I wanted for dinner. These little moments, these small inconsistencies, they added up, but every time I'd start to question her, she'd do something that would pull me back, cook my favorite meal, initiate sex in a way that felt urgent and real. Tell me she loved me while looking me directly in the eyes. And I'd think, I'm being paranoid. The deployment brain, the hypervigilance, it doesn't just turn off. Maybe I'm seeing threats where there aren't any. Maybe this is just what a normal relationship looks like, and I've been alone so long I've forgotten. The breaking point was building, but I couldn't see it yet. I was too close, too invested, too desperate for this to be real. I'd come to Vietnam to escape the feeling of being used, of being insufficient, of being a failure. And here I was, in a beautiful city, with a beautiful woman who said she loved me, living on a fraction of what it cost back home. On paper, I'd won. I'd figured it out. But somewhere deep down, in the part of my brain that had kept me alive through 3 deployments, I knew something was wrong. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet, because admitting it meant admitting I'd been a fool. And after everything I'd been through, all the sacrifices I'd made, all the years I'd given to a country that didn't care about me anymore, I couldn't handle being a fool on top of it all. So I pushed the doubts down, smiled when she smiled, transferred money when she asked, and told myself that everything was fine, that this was still paradise, that I was still the one who'd gotten out and figured it all out. Even as the wall started closing in and the math stopped making sense, and the woman sleeping next to me felt more like a stranger every day, the truth came out on a Tuesday, not dramatically, not with some big confrontation I'd been building toward. Just a Tuesday morning in September, the rainy season starting to ease up, the kind of day that should have been ordinary. I'd gone to the gym early, trying to work off the restlessness I'd been feeling for weeks, that nagging sense that something was off, but I couldn't pin it down. I came back to the condo around 10, sweaty and tired, expecting Lynn to still be asleep because she'd been staying up late on her phone the past few nights. But she was in the shower. I could hear the water running, hear her humming something, and her phone was on the kitchen counter, just sitting there, face up, unlocked. I'm not proud of what I did next. I'd spent my whole life being the kind of guy who respected boundaries, who trusted until given a reason not to. But I walked over to that counter, and I picked up her phone, and I started reading. And everything I'd been trying not to see for the past 2 months came into focus all at once. The messages were in Vietnamese, but I'd learned enough by then to recognize names, to pick out words. There was a conversation thread with someone named Duck. Lots of messages, going back months. I copied a chunk of text, opened Google Translate, pasted it in. The translation was rough but clear enough. When are you coming to Saigon? Soon, as soon as I have enough saved. How much more do you need? Maybe another 1,000. The American is good for it. Laughing emoji, heart emoji. I scrolled up. More messages. He gave me 400 for the buffalo. Can you believe it? These guys are so easy. I almost feel bad, but then I remember he's living here on his military money while we work our asses off. My hands were shaking. I kept scrolling, kept translating, kept reading things I didn't want to believe. There was a group chat with 3 other women, all Vietnamese, and they were comparing notes. Sharing tips. One had a German boyfriend who just bought her a motorbike. Another had an Australian who was paying for her nursing school. Lynn had posted a picture of my balcony view with the caption, "Not bad for $600 a month, and I don't even pay it." Someone responded, "You should get him to buy you a condo." Lynn replied, "Too risky, foreigners can't own property alone. I'll just milk this for another few months, then move to Saigon with Duck." More laughing emojis, more hearts. I found messages to her friend, someone named Trang. Does he suspect anything? No, he's clueless. Yesterday, he asked if my brother's school fees went through okay. I don't even have a brother. You're terrible. I know, but I'm also $3,000 richer than I was 4 months ago. The shower turned off. I heard the bathroom door open. I was still standing there holding her phone, frozen. Everything I'd believed about my life in Da Nang crumbling in real time. Lynn walked into the kitchen wearing my towel, her hair wet, and she saw me with her phone and her face went completely blank. Not scared, not guilty, just blank. Like she was calculating her next move. "What are you doing?" she asked. Her voice was calm. I held up the phone. "Who's Duck?" The air in the room changed, got heavier. She didn't answer right away. Just stood there, water dripping from her hair onto the tile floor, looking at me like she was trying to decide whether to lie or come clean. "A friend," she finally said. "A friend," I repeated. "You're planning to move to Saigon with a friend?" She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't try to grab the phone or make excuses. She just said, "Can I get dressed?" I nodded. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen rereading the messages, translating more of them, each one worse than the last. The water buffalo story was fake. Her father wasn't sick, he'd died 3 years ago. She didn't have a younger brother. The hotel hadn't fired her. She'd quit 2 weeks after meeting me because she'd already figured out I was an easier paycheck. Every story, every emergency, every tearful thank you, it had all been manufactured. Calculated. I was a mark, a job, and I'd fallen for it completely. She came out of the bedroom dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, her bag already packed. She'd known this was coming eventually. Maybe not today, but soon. You don't run a con without an exit strategy. She sat down on the couch, and I sat in the plastic chair across from her. And for a long moment, neither of us said anything. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Was any of it real? She looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something like honesty in her face. "You wanted a girlfriend," she said. "I gave you that. You wanted someone to cook for you and sleep with you and make you feel like you weren't alone. I did that. You got what you paid for." "I didn't pay for anything," I said. "I helped you because I cared about you." She laughed. "Not mean, just tired. You helped me because it made you feel important. Because back in America, you're nobody. Just another broken veteran with a pension and no purpose. But here you could be the hero, the provider, the white savior with money to solve everyone's problems." That felt good, didn't it? I wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I genuinely cared, that this wasn't about ego. But she wasn't wrong, not completely. I had liked feeling needed, had liked being the one with solutions, had liked the way she looked at me when I handed over money. like I was saving her. "Who's Duck?" I asked again. "My boyfriend," she said simply. "We've been together 5 years. We're saving to open a small restaurant in Saigon. You helped with that, so thank you." The casualness of it, the way she said thank you like I'd done her a favor, like this was a normal transaction, it made me feel insane. "Your father," I started. "Died in 2018, she said. "Heart attack. The water buffalo. My family doesn't have a farm. My mom sells fruit at a market in Hoi An. Your brother. Only child." Every lie laid out clean and simple. No drama, no apologizing, just facts. "How many guys have you done this to?" I asked. She shrugged. "You're not the first. Won't be the last. It's how it works here. Lonely expats come looking for paradise, and we give it to them. For a price." "I could report you," I said. "To who? The police? For what?" "You gave me gifts. No one forced you. You wanted to help your girlfriend, and you did. There's no crime." She was right. I hadn't been robbed. Hadn't been scammed in any legal sense. I'd just been stupid. "The guys at the beach tried to warn me," I said quietly. "They said you were too good to be true. And you didn't listen," she said, "because you wanted to believe you were special. That you were different from all the other foreign men who get played. But you're not. You're exactly the same." She stood up, grabbed her bag. "I'm sorry it ended like this," she said, and maybe she even meant it a little. "You're a nice guy, Michael. Too nice. That's the problem. Nice guys always think being nice means something. But it doesn't. Not here." She walked to the door, opened it, then turned back. "For what it's worth, some of it was real. I did like cooking for you. You were kind. Kinder than Duck most of the time. But kind doesn't pay for a restaurant." And then she was gone. Just like that. 4 months of my life, $2,000 of my money, every feeling I'd had about building something real, it all walked out my door in under 10 minutes. I sat there on the couch staring at the spot where she'd been standing, trying to process what had just happened. The apartment felt different already, empty in a way it hadn't been even before she moved in. Her rice cooker was still on the counter. Her plants were still on the balcony. Her shampoo was probably still in the shower. But she was gone, and I knew she wasn't coming back. I picked up my phone to call someone, to tell someone. But who? The guys at the beach would say I told you so. My buddies back in Texas would ask why I was living in Vietnam in the first place. My ex-wife would probably laugh. I was alone. Completely alone. In a country where I didn't speak the language, in a city I'd thought was paradise, in an apartment I believed was home. I spent the rest of that day going through everything, looking for signs I'd missed, evidence I'd ignored, red flags I'd been too blind to see. They were everywhere. The way she'd steered me away from the expat bars after we started dating probably didn't want me talking to guys who might recognize the playbook. The way her emergencies always happened right after I'd mentioned my pension hitting my account. The way she'd never introduced me to her family despite talking about them constantly. The way her friends, the few times I met them, had looked at me with barely concealed amusement. I'd been a joke. The stupid American who thought his $600 condo and his military pension made him special. The guy who thought he'd escaped the rat race and found something authentic. I'd escaped nothing. I just traded one kind of being used for another. Over the next few days, I did what any rational person would do. I went to Thuong Beach and got drunk with the expat guys and told them everything. They didn't say I told you so. They'd all been there in some version or another. Dave had sent 10 grand back to a girl's family before discovering she was married with 2 kids, and the family didn't exist. Tommy had bought his girlfriend a motorbike only to find out she was selling it a week later. Klaus had rented a house for a woman who disappeared the moment the lease was up. This wasn't unique. This was the story. The cautionary tale that every long-term expat in Southeast Asia either lived through or witnessed. We sat there drinking cheap beer and trading war stories, and laughing in that bitter way men laugh when they've been made fools of. And the only option is to find humor in the pain. I asked them why they stayed. If everyone gets burned, if the whole thing is a trap, why not just go back home? Dave shook his head. Back home is worse, mate. At least here the cost of living makes sense. At least here I can afford to live. Yeah, I lost money. Yeah, I got played. But I'm still better off than I was in Melbourne working 60 hours a week to afford a shoebox apartment. Tommy agreed. The women back home aren't any more honest. They're just more expensive. At least here you know the game. You know what you're paying for, Klaus said. You think there's anywhere in the world where people don't use each other? At least the weather's nice here. Their logic was depressing, but not wrong. I'd come to Vietnam to escape being broke and alone, and I was still broke and alone, just with better weather and cheaper beer. But I was still here, still paying $600 a month for a view of the Han River, still eating banh mi for breakfast and pho for lunch, still riding my scooter through streets that no longer felt magical, but just felt like streets. I learned the full scope of it over the next few weeks through conversations with other expats and some sleuthing online. Lynn wasn't her real name. Or maybe it was. I never confirmed. The whole operation was common. Girls would target specific bars and beaches where expats congregated. They'd work in pairs sometimes, one playing the girlfriend and one playing the friend who'd vouch for her authenticity. They'd have a rotation of sob stories, tested and refined, calibrated to extract maximum money with minimum suspicion. The average take per expat was between $2,000 and $5,000 before the relationship, naturally, ended. Some guys lost way more. I'd heard about a British guy who'd sent 40 grand back home before his Vietnamese girlfriend disappeared. Another American had married a woman and bought a house in her name only to discover she'd been married to a local guy the whole time, and the house was never his. I'd gotten off easy. 2 grand and a bruised ego. No legal entanglements, no property disputes. Just a lesson learned. But the psychological damage was deeper than the financial loss. I'd come to Da Nang believing I could start over, that I could be someone different here, that the problems I had back home, the loneliness, the purposelessness, the feeling of being discarded by a country I'd served, those were geographic problems. Solve the geography and solve the problems. But they'd followed me. I was still lonely, still purposeless, still discarded, just in a place with better beaches. The math still worked. My pension still went further here than it would in Texas. I could still save money, still live comfortably, still enjoy the cheap food and the warm weather and the low cost of living. But the dream was dead. The idea that this was paradise, that I'd found some secret escape hatch that made everything better, that was gone. This wasn't paradise. It was just a cheaper place to be miserable. I still see Lynn sometimes. Da Nang's not that big. I'll be on my scooter and I'll pass her on hers, usually with Duck, and we'll make eye contact for a second and then look away. No drama, no confrontation, just acknowledgement. Once I saw her at Thuong Beach, sitting at the same table where I'd met her, sipping a coconut water, wearing a different sundress but the same thoughtful expression. Watching the ocean like she was waiting for something. And there was a Western guy, older than me, German or Dutch by the look of him, standing nearby with a beer, working up the courage to approach her. I thought about warning him, thought about walking over and saying, "Don't. Whatever you're thinking, don't." But I didn't, because maybe he needed to learn the same lesson I did. Or maybe his story would be different. Maybe she'd actually fall for him. Maybe I was the anomaly, not the rule. Or maybe I'm just making excuses because I didn't want to be the bitter expat at the bar warning newcomers about the dangers of pretty Vietnamese girls. That guy is pathetic. And I've got enough problems without adding pathetic to the list. I still live in Da Nang. Still pay $600 a month for my condo overlooking the Han River. Still eat cheap food and drink cheap beer and go to the gym and ride my scooter through streets I used to think were beautiful, and now just think are streets. I don't go to Thuong Beach much anymore. Don't talk to women. I don't already know. Don't let myself believe in anything that feels too good to be true, because it probably is. The math still works. My pension still covers everything with money left over. I'm still technically winning by the metrics I used when I decided to move here. Cost of living, quality of life, financial security. I've got all of that. What I don't have is hope. Don't have purpose. Don't have the feeling that I'm building towards something instead of just killing time in a pleasant location until I die. Some nights, I sit on my balcony with a beer, and I think about going back to Texas. Getting a job, any job, just to have something to do. Reconnecting with the few friends I have left. Maybe even trying to date again. American women with American expectations, expensive and complicated and honest in their dishonesty. But then I remember what I was running from. The cost of everything. The constant grind. The feeling of being invisible, of not mattering, of being chewed up and spit out by a system that had no use for me anymore. And I realize I'm not running toward anything here, I'm just running. And running doesn't actually get you anywhere, it just keeps you moving. The guys at the beach ask me sometimes if I regret it. Coming here, losing the money, getting played. And I tell them no, because regret implies there was a better choice, and I'm not sure there was. I could have stayed in San Antonio and been broke and alone, Or I could come here and be broke and alone with better weather. At least I tried. At least I took the shot. At least I can say I did something, even if that something turned out to be falling for the oldest trick in the expat playbook. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us get. A $600 condo with a view of the river. Cheap food, cheap beer. The illusion of freedom that lasts just long enough to keep you from jumping off a bridge. Paradise was always a lie. I know that now. But the lie was nice while it lasted. And sometimes, on good days, when the sunset hits the water just right and the city sounds fade into white noise, and I've had just enough to drink to blur the edges of reality, I can almost convince myself it was real, that she was real, that I wasn't just another lonely expat getting exactly what I paid for. Almost. But not quite. Never quite.